when people say that everyone's sounding the same, yes, if you just pick up a popular amp sim plugin and you choose a preset and that's what you do, chances are a lot of other people have done the same thing. A lot of people will get like kind of paralyzed because of all the options and they don't know where to start.
There are tons of amps, like real amps and amp sims and whatever, but I don't think there are too many different kinds of amps.
But if you plug the output of a power amp that's supposed to go to speaker, if you plug that into your interface, that's gonna fry it.
Always think about your playing before trying all the plugins you have to get something you could get by practicing a little bit more.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go.
Everyone is sounding the same. Everyone uses the same kind of guitar tones because we all have the same couple of plugins. We're all in the box. Nobody uses real amps anymore and microphones. And that's the reason why every record of every band is kind of sounding the same. That's what a lot of people are telling me and what I see on the internet a lot. And I see it in comments on our content. I see it in emails that I'm getting. I see it in forums and discussions online. And today I want to challenge that belief or that thing that seems to be very, this opinion that seems to be very popular at the moment, because I believe that being in the box when it comes to guitar tones is not something that limits you or makes you sound like everyone else. It can be a really, really, really powerful tool and like the biggest, most powerful pedal board in the world, basically. That's how I think of my computer when I create guitar tones. Anyway, so on this episode, we're going to talk about different ways of creating creative, unique, exciting guitar tones in the box, but I'll also mention a couple of ways outside of the box or like analog on the way in kind of approaches that you can try even if you don't own an amp, if you don't own any mics. There are other cool creative ways that you can come up with great guitar tones, and I want to hopefully inspire you to use whatever you have to come up with the tones that serve your song and that you find exciting so that you won't sound like everyone else, because there's a lot more that you can do than just picking a preset on a plugin that everyone else has as well. All right, so if you are new to the show, my name's Benedikt. I am a mixing engineer. I mix hundreds of songs every single year here at my studio. I've been doing that for more than 10 years, and all the experience and all the lessons learned from that, from my work here, this is what we share on this podcast and this whole platform, the selfrecordingband.com. So if you want to make better sounding recordings in your jam space or home studio, you've come to the right place. Welcome. So glad to have you. And if you're already a listener, you know all that. So welcome back. Always good to have you too. And as always, I'm not doing this by myself. I'm doing this with my friend and co-host, Manel Espinosa Berenguer from Madrid, Spain. Hello, Manel. How are you?
Hi, Benedikt. I'm really, really, really happy to be here today again after a couple of weeks of computer nightmare, which cost me an eye and part of the other. but yeah, this is one of those cases where new gear makes your life easier and faster. So
yeah,
happy.
When it comes to computers especially. Yeah, I'm very happy for you to be back. And this is the first time I'm talking to you without really loud background noise from your computer fan, which is awesome.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah, really cool. So I'm so glad you have that new machine. You've upgraded to a new MacBook, I think, right? MacBook Pro.
Yes.
Yeah, a very, very powerful thing. We're still going to have some noise in the background maybe today, because we just figured out that you have somebody's drilling holes in the wall somewhere in your building, and outside of my studio I have construction work going on too, so maybe there will still be noise, but at least it's not going to come from your computer. Yeah. And maybe the AI gods will fix it all for us anyways. We'll see.
Yeah. The AI did a really good job in last week's podcast.
So. Really? Oh yeah. Okay. Good. Cool. That's good to know. And if you're wondering what we're talking about, we are real humans talking to you, and it's us talking, But we use like a smart AI tool to remove background noise. That's about as far as we get into AI on this. But we are actual humans doing what we say here. Anyway, yeah. Manel, anything else that's new? You sometimes have like these cool little anecdotes, and I haven't talked to you in a while on the podcast, so I was wondering if you have one for us today, or if we just jump straight into the guitar topic.
Yeah, well, I had a little one, which is that I had another wedding. I was playing with my cover band at a wedding,
Yep.
And here in Madrid and also in my hometown in Alicante, we live, we don't live close to the sea, so the humidity is not that crazy. But that wedding was in a place like next to the sea, so the humidity was crazy, like 200%, whatever, crazy. Like we were all sweating and all that. And when you change the ambience, that tends to be bad for your voice. So it was bad for my voice. And I had one of these gigs where, you start singing and you straight away notice that something is off, and there are some notes that for some reasons your vocal cords do not vibrate or whatever.
Yeah.
But, I managed to kind of like stay calm, like assume that the gig is not going to be the best ever because, there's not much you can do.
Yeah.
And just try to breathe and find a way out. And I kind of did. After a while, I kind of, I saved the gig and I could sing, not super comfortable. And I was a little bit tired after the gig. But yeah, those kind of experiences, that just happens, and you have to learn to kind of go through it and do not get desperate. And
Yep. Absolutely.
that's the anecdote.
Absolutely, it happens. I'm just surprised that more humidity was bad for your voice, but like you said, it's just the change of circumstances, right? Because more humidity is usually not too bad. But yeah.
I mean, I don't really know what. I mean, that's my theory. I think that changed it all because we were all like sweating.
Oh yeah.
And it was, probably dehydrated,
yeah.
even though I was drinking water all the time and I did my, my vocal warm-ups and all that. But sometimes it doesn't really matter. If you do everything right, something can go wrong anyways.
That's very true.
You must be, prepared, I would say.
Yeah, very true. So there's another thing we have in common. We both ruined our voices on the weekend. I don't know if we can still hear this on the episode, but like mine was the complete opposite. So it was not a professional thing at all. I was not prepared at all. I didn't take care of my body and my voice at all. So in my case, it was also a wedding though. But in my case, it was one of my best buddies, the singer of my band. He got married last weekend, and there was the wedding. I was his best man, so I was in charge of a couple of things there. And then we had karaoke, which is a great idea and a lot of fun. But also, this is how I ruined my voice. Like I was just singing karaoke for hours, and I didn't drink water. Other things, but not water, and at least not much. And I didn't warm up and all of that, of course. But it was so much fun. And yeah. Also, nobody cared at this wedding, of course. It was just about having fun. And I did have a lot of fun. So here we are with background noise and voices ruined, but we're going to make it through. So, on the topic of guitar tones now. Let's get your creative juices flowing here a little bit. And I don't know if you have done a lot of these things that I'm talking about, Manel, or that I want to talk about. We'll see. But I just don't think it's a good idea to. I think to just complain about how everything is always getting worse is never a good idea, in my opinion. But the whole, everyone's sounding the same, everything's so boring, and modern music sucks, and all of that. I just don't believe in that, because it's always like you are in control. You can make unique sounding stuff more than ever. I think. Yes, a lot has already been done. But you have all the tools in the world. Even if you only have the computer and what's in it, it's still more than enough. So let's talk about a couple of ways that how you can achieve this. So first of all, like I said, I see the computer and the DAW as like a giant pedal board when it comes to guitar tones, because you can. When people say that everyone's sounding the same, yes, if you just pick up a popular AmpSim plugin, and you choose a preset, and that's what you do, chances are a lot of other people have done the same thing. But you have all those plugins, and not just amp plugins and pedal plugins in there. You have all these different plugins in there, stock plugins, whatever. And you can put those in front of any AmpSim, or you can replace AmpSims with those and just do creative things and use them like pedals. So you can put any kind of effect, any kind of modulation effect, delays, reverbs, phasers, whatever you have. You can put compressors, saturation, all the things that you use as normal plugins in a mix. You can use this as pedals in front of any amp and just experiment with that. So that's one thing. The other thing is you can tweak those AmpSims. You don't have to pick a preset. You can pick your virtual microphones, put them in different spots. You can change the IR. You can tweak the amp settings, of course. You can combine different AmpSims together. So you have a lot of different options. So that's the first thing. I don't think the excuse of like we're in the box and we only have a couple of tools that everyone uses, I don't think that's a great excuse. And yeah, there's a ton of things here. What I understand though is that a lot of people will get like kind of paralyzed because of all the options and they don't know where to start. And so I wonder if you have any idea of like maybe you have never even had this problem and you're just fine with whatever the AmpSims give you. So I wonder what your perspective is there, or maybe you have some thoughts on like where to start or how to figure out what could work for what I want to do for my song. I just want to find a way for people to try other things and not just go back to the preset that they already know because that's their comfort zone, sort of. So I want to inspire people to leave that comfort zone and find intentional approaches with other tools instead.
Well, first thing that I must say is that generally speaking, I don't like diving too much into, AmpSims and amps in general or whatever. Normally, I would spend like, I don't know, 2-3 hours or something like that working on my tones, and those tones will stay there for quite a while unless I get into a situation where I think I need a different tone or whatever. So, but the thing is that I think it helps if you know what kinds of amps are out there, because like there are tons of amps, like real amps and AmpSims and whatever, but I don't think there are too many different kinds of amps. Like every amp has a little different thing, but Marshall mod is a Marshall mod, and there are lots of that's a kind of sound, and then
yes.
You have the whatever the Fender, whatever. So if you know what can you get with each of those types of amps, that's better, because once you get into these crazy apps that have tons of amps, you kind of know your way, because I mean, I don't like trying amps and being crazy with this. When I find something that I like, that's the one who's gonna be with me for a year or something. So
yeah, for that kind of sound at least. Yeah. And it's pretty much the same. That's interesting you say that, because in the analog world, or like outside of the computer, the stuff that people always like romanticize about, where this is usually what happens. Like most people have a couple of different guitar amps that they have as their go-tos, and then a couple of cabs, maybe whole chains with mics and everything, but they use that stuff over and over again. It's not that they reinvent everything every single time they record. Like even in of course, there are like large recording facilities that have whatever, how many amps and stuff, but like even the best studios not always have 100 amps. They might have 10 or so, and then a couple go-tos, and then so you have much more options now in the DAW, but you don't even have to use them in terms of when it comes to amps. You said one very interesting thing here, which is totally true, that there are only a couple of categories of amps, and within that you have countless options, but they are not that different from one another. The cab makes a bigger difference than the amp within those categories, and then where you put the mic and the effects you use, and you're playing, of course, and all of that. So we can be, if we really want to oversimplify it, you have like the British kind of crunch sort of sound where you have Marshall, orange, maybe. Then we have this kind of category. Vox is maybe a little outside of that, but then we have clean Fender tones. Then we have the more American kind of sound, or modern, polished, high gain kind of tones, where we have a Mesa rectifier, or we have a 5150 kind of thing. And then within all of these amps, like even if we separate it into 7 or 8 categories, you'll find under each of these categories, you'll find 100 amps or so or whatever, but they will all be very, very similar. So if you swap out one American high gain amp for another one, the difference is going to be less than if you change the cab. Or if you change from one Marshall to another, the difference is going to be smaller than swapping the cab from a Marshall to a Mesa, for example, or whatever. So there's that. You only have so many options in general, and it's good that it is that way because this is plenty to serve any kind of song, and you're going to be fine. And then what really matters, as always, and we're repeating ourselves, but like the song and your playing and all of that matters so much. Like even if you copy the exact same chain that somebody else has, it will still not sound like that person just because it's not them, it's you. You play differently, and it will be, different. I keep coming back to your story about the Cory Wong thing where you bought that guitar and you wanted to sound like him, but then you realized you're not the same person. So it's probably not the guitar, But yeah, so there's that. But then, so let's say, Manel, you have your go-tos, like you say, they stay with you for a long time. You still don't want to use the exact same sounds, of course, for every single song because you need to surf the song. So what do you do to make it unique and to make it fit the song?
Interesting. I normally I can use effects like, I know, I remember that recently I used some chorus, which, that dramatically changed the sound, like, or at least how you perceive it. And then sometimes you can change the pedals you use with the amp if you use anything. Like I tend to have an overdrive pedal before the amp. So I might or might not change it, use it or not use it. And normally when I make my presets, I normally make them with one amp, but I have 4 different options, like one with more gain, less gain, effects, and stuff like that. So that's what I pretty much use. But I know if I have to play a song that needs more heavy, like a heavier sound, maybe I would probably start by using a different guitar. Instead of my Fender, because like if I use the Ibanez, which has more, how do you call it? Like the pickups have more
sustain, or
like input or whatever.
Yeah, they're harder. Yeah, more output. Yeah,
output. So that dramatically changed the sound of the amp. Like it's like a different amp. It sounds better, different. Like for example, what happens to me is that, I've been playing heavy metal stuff for a big part of my life. So some of that's on my playing, and depending on the guitar that I use, that comes out as more obvious or not. Like, it's like, I feel like the Fender Strat is kind of like it kind of kills the heavy metal player in me. Like it doesn't come out as much, but if I take the Ibanez, as long as you do one, a couple downstrokes with palm mute, it already sounds like this thing. So yeah, I think that the first thing that I would change is the guitar when seeking for a different tone.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. So, but we covered all that stuff in plenty of like guitar tone episodes that we have, and it's still very true what you say. But let's just assume somebody has like just one guitar and a laptop, simplest setup ever, and they only have like an amp sim plugin, and now they are doomed to just make the same kind of sounds that everyone else is making, So let's assume that this is the case. No, they're not. And I'm going to get a little more specific to help people understand what I'm actually talking about. So, for example, have you ever tried, instead of, like, let's say you plug into your amp sim and then you feel like, oh, I want more gain or more distortion. So you maybe either you pick a different preset that says something with like high gain or whatever. Maybe that's what you did so far. Or maybe you went one step further than a lot of people do and you actually reached for the knobs on the virtual amp and you turned the gain up or down. A lot of people don't even do that. They just switch presets. But like, let's assume you've done that, but it's still not interesting. You still feel like it sounds kind of boring. Have you considered putting something in front of the amp to just drive it hotter? If the output of your guitar is not enough or the gain of the amp is not enough and you want really crazy distorted tone or a different kind of distortion, maybe you just don't like how it sounds, have you tried putting some sort of plugin in front of it? It can be a simple plugin that just drives the input harder, to just really overdrive the amp and see what happens. Like nothing's gonna, no one's gonna die. You can send 30 dBs too much into an amp and see what happens. Yeah. So that's the thing. Or have you tried putting a stock distortion plugin in front of it and distort the DI before it hits the amp? Or have you tried a compressor plugin that brings out the sustain of the guitar, maybe shapes the transients differently, gives you more or less attack, and then you get a different type of response from the amp because you've compressed it before the amp? Or have you tried a transient designer? Most DAWs have that as a stock plugin to boost the attacks. Maybe you're just not hitting hard enough when you're doing palm mutes, and if you boost the attacks a little bit, maybe that sounds more powerful. Maybe you want to boost the sustain, that gives you an interesting feel for your lead tones. Or you can do so much. You can put a fuzz plugin, some stock distortion thing, some emulation, some preamp simulation that you can drive. You can put all of these things in front of the amp and get completely different textures and responses from your amp just by using saturation or gain plugins that just change the input to the amp, and then also the structure of the distortion. So that's one simple thing you can do. You can use bass amps on guitars and guitar amps on bass, for example. I don't know if you've ever done that, Manel. If you're a fan of that, I love that. I have a few very specific things I like to do, but I don't know if you've ever tried that.
I've tried at some point using a bass amp for the guitar, but not a big expert doing that, but I've tried it.
Yeah, because the thing is, at the end of the day, it's all just amps, and they expect an instrument signal, and it doesn't matter if it's a bass or guitar. So a lot of people I've heard, and also this is true not only in the box, but when I was still producing a lot at my studio, and I made people plug their bass into a guitar amp, a lot of people were afraid that they're going to break the amp if they do that or something. No, you won't. It's the same type of signal. It's lower and thicker strings, and the output might be different, but you definitely don't break the amp. It's just plug it in. It's just another guitar, just a different one. So what's cool is if you use, and if you think about it, a lot of popular amps have been designed as a bass amp, but then people used it as a guitar amp, or the other way around. So if you think about a Fender Bassman was a guitar amp, actually, but then people used it as a bass amp. It was designed to, or both actually, it was just an amp designed to give you a lot of clean low end at high volumes, because the earlier amps, if you turned them up a lot, they started to saturate because they didn't have that much power. And so the moment you got loud, it also got distorted. And so they wanted to create amps with more headroom, more power, so that you can get more loud, clean tones out of a guitar, for example, without distortion. And turns out it's also cool to get to amplify a bass, and the other way around. Or if you have the Eric Valentine thing, and he's not the only one, but like if you use an Ampeg V4, for example, really popular, cool tube bass amp, that sounds awesome. If you plug a guitar into that, and by the way, this works super well with the emulations of this amp. If you plug a guitar into that and you crank the mid-range all the way, and you crank the gain all the way, and you crank the output, it has such a cool type of distortion that sounds freaking amazing, and I love that. It sounds heavy, it has a lot of bottom end and size. You can try that with the Plugin Alliance V4 or the UAD or which version you have digitally. Just put that on your guitar DI, crank the mid-range, crank the gain, crank the output, and see what that sounds like. It can't even work on a heavy metal record. It's supposed to be a bass amp these days for most people, but it's an absolutely fantastic sounding amp. And if you put a pedal in front of it, you can drive it even harder. So that can be an option for unique tones, right? Or for heavy bass tones, try putting a guitar amp on a bass and see what that sounds like. The distortion is going to be different. It's going to have an edge to it that even a driven bass amp might not give you. So you can split up the signal and combine different amps. You can use a clean amp for the low end and then just duplicate the same DI track and use a dirty guitar amp for the top end and the distortion and then just blend the two. That's the other thing. With a DAW, you have infinite malts, and a malt on a patch bay would be just a duplicate of the same patch, sort of, which you would do in the analog, where you can like send one guitar signal to different amps. In the DAW, it's so easy. You just duplicate the track and you can put like 10 amps on it if you want. And so there's so many cool options. The thing always, and this is what I was talking about with the paralysis thing, is that it always helps to be intentional and to have a sound in your mind. So it can be overwhelming to know that you have all the options and you don't even know what you want, unless you're doing a creative experimentation session, which is also fun. But it really helps to be like, I like this tone, but it's kind of boring and I want something extra. What do I actually want? Do I want a little bit of a fuzzy kind of distortion or more distortion, different kind of distortion? Okay, let me go through all my distortion plugins on my computer, put them in front of the amp and see if something is what I'm looking for. Do I want bigger low end? Okay, what could I do? Do I have any plugins that I know from other uses that they typically enhance my low end in a cool way? What if I use that in front of my amp or after the amp or wherever in the chain while you're playing? Can I combine two amps because I like this character of this one and this character of this one? The sound in my head is kind of between the two. Let me see if that works. So just think about what you want and then think about situations where you have used certain things in other ways that could work in this scenario too. And that will get you closer to what you want. It will not always work, of course, but it will definitely lead to unique results. Now let's get to the whole thing of like using plugins or any kind of tools instead of amps. Have you ever done that, Manel? Have you ever recorded a guitar, like an electric guitar or bass, without an amp at all? Like no amp, but no amp sim, just the DI, and you did something with that?
Yeah, normally when I work on funky stuff, like clean stuff, it's normally just the sound from the guitar with a compressor, and that's it. Like nothing else.
Yeah.
So, but nothing crazy. But
yeah,
there's no amp involved. Yeah,
absolutely common. Yeah, you don't have to use it. Bass, the same thing. Sometimes a really good bass DI is all you need. Maybe you don't even need the amp, and so, but here are ways that you can, or things you can do instead of amps that can still sound like kind of a unique kind of amp tone. So for example, what people have been doing analog forever, and you can emulate the thing in the DAW too, is you can drive microphone preamps or like instrument preamps more or less in this case, like guitar amps. So if you have an actual good microphone preamp, like an analog one, like a Neve 1073 or a clone of these or an API or something that has a sound when you crank it, like something that just doesn't clip in an ugly way, but it lets you drive it. So those like high-end preamps, they have this saturation character that the more you drive them, the more they saturate and distort, but not suddenly and ugly, but nice and gradually. So, and if you don't have any of these, you can use a plugin emulation of those. There are plenty of emulations of a Neve 1073, for example, and this particular preamp sounds pretty cool on just a guitar. So you can plug your guitar either into the instrument input if you have one of those, or you can use a DI box and plug it into the mic input, or you can just record as you would always into the box and then use a plugin and just manipulate it there. And what you can try is, what happens if you just put it on a DI, you crank the red knob on the 1073, and you turn down the output instead to compensate, so you're overdriving the circuit of this plugin, and then listen to what that sounds like. It is a really cool type of distortion that is definitely sounding different than most amps. And if you think it's too fizzy, fuzzy, whatever, because you're missing the behavior of a cab, you can just put an IR behind that. So instead of an amp and a cab, you now have this driven preamp and your cab. Or you can, instead of using an IR, just create a filter curve yourself that you like. You can just filter out the fizzy top end if you don't like that. Or you can leave it in if it's cool. But like, plugging guitars into consoles and driving them is a thing that has been done for a long time, and you can do the same thing in the box. It doesn't mean it's exactly the same thing, but it doesn't matter. It's all just tools. So try that. It's really a lot of fun. I've done that a lot of times when I needed some little extra, what I always call like some extra hair on a part, where a little bit of fizzy or teeth or whatever you want to describe it to a guitar tone, because sometimes high gain tones are so smooth in a way. If it's like so distorted that it sounds like this pad sound almost, and you don't have any texture anymore. And then if I want a little bit of grit and teeth on the sound, duplicating the DI, distorting it with something like this preamp or just a stock distortion plugin that gets really ugly quickly, and then blending in that in with a nice polished tone can give you back some of that character and grittiness, And so plenty of options they can use that you can do there, and it's really a lot of fun. And even for just slightly crunchy blues tones, try the saturation of one of those preamp models. Like you have an UAD interface, Manel. I'm sure there's some kind of unison preamp in there that you have. It's really a lot of fun to play around with that and guitar, and then either put an amp and a cap behind it or not. But like it's mic preamps are a lot of fun.
Yeah, at the end, I think the thing is that there's no bad tone.
No,
whatever.
exactly. What is good or bad, even?
Yeah. So you can try anything. Many things might not be designed for the guitar, but that doesn't really matter at all. So
yeah, that's the whole point. I want people to no longer be afraid of using things that are not made for that purpose, because you cannot break things. You can just plug pretty much anything into anything. The only exception, before somebody does something stupid now, the only exception is please don't connect the speaker output of an actual amp with anything but a speaker. That's the only exception, right? So you can plug line outputs into all kinds of inputs. You can plug instruments into all kinds of inputs. It might sound weird or whatever, but it won't break anything. But if you plug the output of a power amp that's supposed to go to speaker, if you plug that into your interface, that's gonna fry it. So don't do that. And it's maybe also fry your amp too if it's a tube amp. So that's the only exception. Don't do that. But like that being said, if you own an amp, you don't have to plug it into a cap. You can get a like a hot plate, a power soak, like some sort of what's the term? You just need the resistance,
thing.
At the what were you going to say?
The load.
The load
thing.
is the word I was looking for. Yes, exactly. You need a load box is the word I was looking for. Yes, you just need that to not kill your amp. But then if you have that connected to the amp instead of the speaker, you can, of course, record the output of the load box if it has one, and then use something digital afterwards. Or you can just grab the line output of your preamp of the amp and combine it with a different power amp or something. Or just record that and have a really fuzzy, ugly tone and shape that in the DAW. There's endless options that you haven't even considered yet with just the stuff that you already own. So you aren't limited to a preset. You can do so much. But the thing that's required, I think, and what's really holding people back from doing all of that is that a lot of people are lacking basic understanding of what those tools actually do. So they are afraid that they're going to break things, which I hope is not the case anymore now. And they don't know what that is that they have in their head, like that sound, like how they could achieve that or get that to come out of the speakers. So what I would really encourage you to do is go on a sort of quest and like a tone quest, and like just grab a couple of plugins and learn what they actually do. But simple stuff. Pick one or two stock saturation plugins and just put it on something and drive it and see which kind of distortion that actually is. Pick a compressor and really learn the basics, fundamental things about compression. And then see what happens if you compress after the guitar or in front of the amp, or in front of the amp. Pick one or two mic preamps or simulations and see when you crank them, what do they sound like? What does that actually do to my signal? Like pick just a couple of things, learn them well, so that you can then apply it intentionally. I think that's the thing. Or if you're wondering about all the different outputs of your amp, like I just mentioned, spend an hour connecting the line output and recording that, or using a load box and recording that and comparing the two. Compare your actual cap to an IR if you have that. whatever you have, like spend some time to really intentionally compare these things and learn what they sound like. I think that's something you got to do, because otherwise you will never be able to be intentional. And what I do is, like, I don't do these experiments in my actual sessions, because that just takes time away from the project, and it takes me out of my flow state and all that. But I schedule specific creative experimentation or learning sessions where, like, I set aside an hour or two, and the whole purpose is that I learn a new tool. And then what I've learned there, that's going to be applied on my next couple of sessions. So I separate the two. So you could maybe do that as well. Manel, have you ever done any guitar tone enhancement with completely different things that are not even guitars? So your goal was to make the guitar tone different, better, whatever, but you achieved that through something entirely different.
Yes, but when I did it, I wasn't really thinking about the guitar tone. I was more thinking about the song or the melody. But what I've done at some points is like supporting a guitar melody with a very distorted piano sound.
I love that.
Which kind of sounds like a guitar.
Yeah.
Actually. But yeah, I wasn't thinking about the tone. It was more about the arrangement of the song, or yeah.
I love that example. This, if you wouldn't have said it, that would have been one that I would have brought up, because it's funny how, I mean, it's not even, it makes sense kind of, because a piano is also a string instrument. Mm-hmm. And if you, at a very clear sounding one with a very clear overtone structure, and if you have a nice guitar riff, and for me, it's mostly, I don't know if I've supported a guitar line kind of, but maybe it's the same thing you were doing. What I often have done is like support big, heavy, open chords guitar parts where I wanted some extra bottom end, some extra weight, and then also some clarity to just enhance that part. And so layering just the basic chord progression, sort of root notes of the chord progression, just layering them below the guitar. So very simple, just the individual notes, layer them below the guitar, make them super tight in terms of timing, and then distorting that piano can add, again, a different type of distortion texture, but then also extra big bottom end if you go an octave below the guitar, and then also extra clarity on the top end because of the very clear overtones of the piano. If you think about it, if you've ever heard a bass, what a bass sounds like, a bass guitar, when you put brand new strings on it, especially something like Pro Steels or some very clear strings, it almost sounds like a piano tone when you hit the lowest string. It has this clarity. It's very similar. And so you can also enhance the bass or make the bass sound clearer or brighter or whatever with that kind of trick. And going back to my beloved like 1073 preamp thing, if you plug it, like if you mic a piano or you use a virtual piano and then put a 1073 after it, or you plug it into a 1073 if you have that, and you crank that on piano, that sounds fantastic to me. Like that's very, 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 very cool. So that's what I did in these situations, is I just distorted the piano with that preamp, layered it below the guitars. Amazing example. Yeah. You can also do the opposite. You can make things smoother and add like pad sounds behind the guitar to like fill in the gaps and make the guitar sound more ambient or something without changing the actual guitar tone. You can add like synth lines that can sound like it's a guitar effect, but it's actually a programmed synth in the background for like ambient pad parts. Yeah. You can double a solo. Like I have this one, I think I even showed it on one of our coaching calls, where they doubled, what was it? I think they used some kind of, either they doubled it with their voice or it was a voice sample or so, but it was like a distorted lead guitar and a distorted vocal line at the same time. And it just created this fuzzy lead line where you couldn't really tell, is this a guitar? Is this a vocal? Is this a synth or whatever? I think it was all three actually. But it was just this nice, super distorted lead line. And yeah, it wasn't easy to tell if it's actually guitar, but it definitely made it sound unique and exciting.
Yeah. The thing is that here we're getting into a unclear territory between arrangement and tone. Like, I don't know if I would consider that the tone of the guitar. I would consider it more like an arrangement element or whatever, but well, it doesn't really matter because the result is the same. But yeah, what I've also done with the pianos, similar to that, is that I went to my grandma's house. She has I guess it has more than 100 years old, probably, like a piano, but it's really, really old. Never been used for like 50 years or whatever, so it's really out of tune. It's broken, basically. And I recorded some keys that were kind of fine. And with those samples, I created a piano sound, which sounds really weird, but I like to have it, below things, not really easy to notice because it's a little bit out of tune, but I kind of tuned it artificially, but it sounds weird anyways. So yeah, that's another thing I use.
I love that. And I think you're right. It is arranging to a degree, but I think you can also use it if you can't get the sound you have in your head by just tweaking the guitar tools or the guitar tone itself. You can achieve the sound by combining different, things together. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of this in-between kind of territory. But man, you got to come over here at some point, sometime soon, because what I want to do is, earlier this year, my grandma passed, and when we cleaned up the house and everything, or like we removed everything so it can be sold, we found a lot of very old, sometimes pretty weird instruments in there, and nobody in the family really cared about it because they're not everyone's a musician. But I said, like, I don't want to throw this stuff away. I don't know what I'm going to be doing with it or where I'm going to put it, but I basically saved all those instruments, and they're now sitting there in the studio, in like Thomas's room at my studio. So Thomas is like surrounded by what looks like a museum of weird instruments. And so a lot of it is like old and kind of broken. Other stuff is pretty cool. But my kind of plan was, some of it will only be like decoration, and I can't really do anything with it. I just don't want to throw instruments away in a way. I don't know. It's a weird thing of mine. But I thought about sampling all those things and creating virtual instruments for myself from that. And so I could see us have a lot of fun creating weird notes with those instruments and sampling it all, traditional Bavarian instruments from like 100 years ago.
Yeah. We can make the Bavarian broken instruments music library.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I love those kinds of ideas. And so yeah, I hope this is kind of inspiring and gets you thinking outside of the box, but but in different ways. If you're listening to this, I want to get to one last point here in this episode, which is, you can also use very weird things that you might own that you didn't even know you can use that to create tones. So just an example. Right next to me over there, this is from my grandma, actually, from her house when she passed away a couple years ago. I found this very, very old tube radio. I don't know if it's in my frame, actually. It's behind me somewhere there. Maybe in the full frame. It's just an old, tube radio. Nah, I think it's not in the frame. Anyway, but it has inputs and outputs. And I just thought like, well, let's plug something into this thing and turn it up and see what it sounds like. It has a speaker in it. And so I reamped guitars through that. It's just an old tube circuit. So you can bypass the whole radio part of it. You just plug something in, turn up the volume knob, and put a microphone in front of it. And it turns out it is a pretty broken, unique, but also cool sounding, distorted or crunchy tone, a relatively lo-fi, but definitely unique, and it was fun. And I used it as an additional layer on a song once. Or, these little, these little like voice memo machines that they used to have before we did it on phones, like the little tape cassette recorders to record voice memos. I had one of those. I didn't even know where this was coming from. We had one of those at our jam space at a friend's house when we formed our band. We plugged the guitar into that, and we were just driving the tape voice memo thing, and we connected that to an actual guitar amp and a speaker, and it had a really cool tone, actually. So we were using that as kind of an overdrive pedal in front of the amp. And you can do all kinds of things. Anything that has a line input or something, just plug shit into it and reamp it and see what it sounds like. There's so many different options. And so all that to say, no, you are not doomed to sound like everyone else. There's way more than just using presets. And I think the two things you need to overcome is the fear of breaking something or breaking any rules, because there are no rules. Like Manel said, there is like, what's a good tone anyways? And then the other thing is having a sound in your head, forming your taste and what you want to do, and then getting some basic knowledge of the things you have so that you can then apply intentionally. I think this is kind of the requirement, because otherwise you will be overwhelmed and paralyzed and never really know if what you're doing is good or not. So it requires a bit of boldness and getting rid of the fear, but then also some basic knowledge of different tools that you have.
Can I say one last of the last thing?
You can say 10 of the last things.
Which is that, yeah, gear is amazing, but do not fall into the...
Fall.
Do not fall. Oh my God, 2 weeks without making the podcast and my English is already down. Whatever. Do not fall into the trap of thinking that gear can solve everything, because sometimes it's about your playing, and if you want to get more attack, you just play harder, for example, so yeah, just that side note there. Always think about your playing before trying all the plugins you have to get something you could get by practicing a little bit more.
100% agreed. And maybe this is also good to know for people that alone makes you sound unique already. So you don't even have to be afraid of that whole thing, because if you've ever, like, we have worked with multiple, different musicians, different people, so we know. So like, we are not afraid of that, and most producers that I've ever talked to are not afraid of the whole unique thing at all, because they know that if I give my guitar here to 3 different people with the same rig and everything's exactly the same, I'm going to get 3 very different results. And just knowing that alone is enough for me to not worry about the uniqueness thing, because I just know how much of a difference it makes if you just swap out the player. So you as a human are unique, and you can practice, like you said, Manel, you can play the way that you want on your record. And then in addition to that, you have all the gear options. So you just don't need to be afraid of any of that. And then also if you think about, years ago in this era that everybody's so, they always like, people always they always seem to believe that, 50 years ago, whatever, things were just better and everything was like more unique and sounding cooler or whatever. The truth is that they had way less tools available, and everybody was pretty much using the same things. They even used the same kind of musicians. They were like very popular session musicians. Like if you Google like the Wrecking Crew or other people, they were playing on all of the records. And still every song was unique. And still people love all of that more than anything. Most studios had one console. That was it. No racks of outboard gear, no computers full of plugins, like a console with the same kind of channel strip on every record. And all they did was like they plugged the microphone into that and recorded it. And still they got so many different sounds out of that same thing, because they were driving it differently, because it was different people, because it was different songs. And so with very limited options back then, they still managed to make things sound unique. So there's no excuse nowadays with everything we have. And there's nothing to complain about. And so, yeah, it's just hopefully helps you, get rid of that fear.
Yeah, I think this could lead to another podcast, but I think it's really difficult to define what is unique. Because like 3 different people playing through the same amp, yeah, they are going to be different, but is that unique? Like in what? Yeah, I have a bit of...
Okay, that's interesting. I consider it unique, like if it's different, but maybe...
It's unique, but it's not groundbreaking.
No, that's not. It's like there's a difference between a new revolutionary thing and just something that is unique because it is slightly different from everything else. But maybe slightly different is all you need. That's the thing. It's like,
yeah, I mean, you don't need anything actually. So it is whatever you want.
yeah. What is good or bad and all that. Like, it gets very philosophical again, Manel. I know that's your thing. So maybe we can come up with a philosophical episode on a similar topic at some point. But I love these because at the end of the day, this is what we really need these days more than anything. I think that, it's not about the gear anymore. It's not about those limitations anymore. Now it's much more about creativity. And now with, the rise of AI and all of that, even more, like, we need to think about these taste, art, philosophical kind of topics and think about why do we even do this? Like, what's cool about it? What do I like? What can I do? These topics are getting more and more important, I think, compared to the purely technical ones, because the tech is not the limit anymore. Of course, you need an understanding, and most people don't understand it enough to use it well, but it is not the limiting factor if you put in the work to learn that. So, yeah. Talking about learning all of that, by the way, if you're not aware, I haven't been mentioning it on a couple of episodes lately, but we have this what we call the Self-Recording Syndicate, this coaching program that you can join, where we can help you define your taste and figure out what it actually is that you like, and then figure out the right tools for that, or how to use the tools that you already own for that. And so we just came up with a new, we always update the program and we kind of restructure things, but the way we just did it is like, we looked at all the people that went through the program at this point, the one-on-one program is what I'm talking about. And we looked at, like, what have they achieved? How did they do it? And what we figured out is that every single person who has done the things that we agreed to do, like who has followed our advice, implemented the feedback, did the work that they said they would be doing, every single one of those people has gotten at least one fully done, release-ready, professional-sounding thing that they could release that they were super happy with out of this. And so we decided to kind of make a guarantee around this, that if you join this program and you implement the things that we agree together when we make your plan, you'll get at least one song out of this that you are really happy with. And if you don't, but you have done all the work, but for some reason there's no result, we'll keep working with you for free until you do. So we say, like, if in the first 6 months, because that's where everybody managed to do this, if in the first 6 months you don't have a result where you're like, yes, that's cool, I want to release this because I'm proud of it, if that doesn't happen, I'm gonna keep working with you for free until you have that, because every person so far has done this, with the exception of those who there are always the exception. A couple of people just disappeared and never really showed up to do the things that, I mean, I can't help you. I can show you the things, I can coach you, but I can't, like, drag you on the field. You got to show up for the game, right? So there's that. And then also, what we've done is, like, the first step we always do when you join the program is you apply for coaching to see, so that we can see if you're a great fit and if it even makes sense to like offer you what we have, because sometimes there are alternative options that are better for you. And then when we approve the application, we do a free call and we create a custom music production plan just for you and your situation. And we do that. And then if you agree to work together, we will write out that full plan, and we put a lot of time into this now. We've changed the way we do this a little bit. And then we pitch this plan to you, we put it in front of you, and you can look at it and say, okay, this is what we're going to be doing first and then next, and here's my goal, and here's all the things I need to learn and I need to achieve. We listen to your current work, analyze it all, make that plan for you. And then if you don't absolutely love this plan and you think, you know what, I don't think this is going to get me anywhere, you don't pay us nothing. And then we have put in a lot of work to create the plan for you, and it was for nothing, but that's fine. We just part ways and you don't pay us. So you have the guarantee that you only pay us if you absolutely love the plan we create together, and that you're going to have at least one fully finished song that you're going to be proud of after 6 months at the latest, or I'll keep working with you for free until you do. You can stay for much longer in the program. A lot of people have done that if you want more than just one song, but we just saw that everybody achieved those things. And so, yeah. This is how it works. If you're interested in doing that, you can just go to theselfrecordingband.com and apply there, and then we chat, and we'll see if we can find your unique style and taste and make it all come out of the speakers. I would love to do that.
Pretty sure you will.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So let's wrap this up. As always, I'd love to hear feedback. If you think these kinds of big picture topics are cool, let us know. If you don't think it's cool, you want more audio examples and specific techniques, also cool, let us know. If you're just like, show me how to EQ my damn snare for the 5th time, we can do another one of those. No, but seriously, if you are looking for specific advice on specific topics, let us know. If you like these episodes, let us know. And if you want Manel to be philosophical on certain topics, because he does that really well, let us know. We'd love to hear that. Cool.
Oh my God.
All right. Enough for today. Thank you so much for listening once again to this show. Thank you, Manel, for joining me on this one.
Yeah.
For some reason, just talking to you or at you for an hour makes me feel more creative.
Okay.
It's like,
that's great.
You have that creative kind of aura, that makes me question everything. So thank you for doing that today with me again. And I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.